It's funny how the fortunes of a team can change as a season plays out. When we look back at the 2014 San Diego Chargers, it's amazing how much the narrative changed about this team throughout the season. This was a team at one point in time that started off 5-1, and we were talking about, many of us, myself included, this perhaps being the best team in the AFC, surely going to win the AFC West, and perhaps even being the best, most balanced team in the National Football League, and a real threat to not only go on to Super Bowl 49, but potentially win the whole damn thing. That was the narrative, and we can't forget about this. This was a team that started off 5-1. Impressive victory over the Seahawks in week number 2. This was a team that was rolling. And then something happened along the way, and the wheels, frankly, kind of fell off a little bit as they went 4-6 the rest of the way. And while they finished 9-7 and had their second straight winning season under head coach Mike McCoy, they failed to make the playoffs this time around. And to me, when I look at this Chargers season of 2014, I look at this team and it perfectly illustrates just how narrow that margin is in professional football, in the NFL, between not being in the playoffs and potentially being the best team in the playoffs. Here's what I mean. When you look at the Chargers, 5 of their 7 losses came to the Denver Broncos, who they lost to twice, the Kansas City Chiefs, who they lost to twice, and that opening week loss to the Arizona Cardinals. 3 teams with winning records, 2 of them playoff teams, a combined 5 of their 7 losses to those what you would classify as quality opponents. Hence, in part, why the Chargers finished 9-7. Keep this in mind. To me, one of the biggest keys to success for any team is success within your division. You're going to face a very uphill battle going 2-4 in your division, expecting to make the playoffs. It can happen, but it rarely does. And in this case, even if the Chargers would have just broken water, treaded water, middle of the road, found a way maybe to beat the Chiefs in Week 17, went 3-3 to division, they'd have been 10-6, and they'd have been in the playoffs. And once you get into the playoffs again, anything can happen. Anything can happen. Just think about it this way, though. What happens if the Chargers find a way to win that opening week game against the Cardinals, and they beat the Chiefs, let's say in Week 17? And they find a way to beat the Broncos once in 2014 like they did in 2013. Now we're talking about a Chargers team that is 12-4, mind you, 12-4, and AFC West champions that also gets a first-round bye. And if they found a way to beat the Chiefs twice, the Broncos once, and beat the Cardinals in week number 1, this is a 13-3 Chargers team that not only wins the AFC West, but has the number 1 overall seed and home field advantage throughout the AFC playoffs. The margin is very small sometimes from just missing the playoffs to being the best team in the playoffs. And to me, the Chargers perfectly epitomize that. So what kind of went wrong for this team in 2014? I look at the Chargers in 2014 offensively, and that's where you have to start because Phillip Rivers is ultimately their identity. He is their franchise piece. You've got an offensive-minded head coach. You have a great offensive infrastructure there with Frank Reich as the offensive coordinator. You have a great offensive infrastructure. But in terms of the talent, you have an offensive line that's shaky, to say the very least. And they did a very good job in 2014 working around the fact that this offensive line wasn't that good, in particular in pass protection for Phillip Rivers. You're talking about a team that lacked a consistent running game all year. They had flashes and moments from Ryan Matthews when he was healthy, or a couple of nice spurts from Brandon Oliver, but nothing consistent. Think about it this way. Their leading rusher had 582 rushing yards. That's not exactly a great formula for success. In terms of in the passing game where you would expect the Chargers' major identity to be, you've got Phillip Rivers with some talent there, an aging but still productive Antonio Gates, a Keenan Allen who regressed some in 2014, a Malcolm Floyd that is solid when healthy but not spectacular. No 1,000-yard receivers. His leading receiver had 856 yards. So you didn't even have a running back with 600 yards, meaning that you lack consistency in the running game. And you didn't even have a receiver go for 1,000 yards. That means that Phillip Rivers really had to spread the ball, and he didn't have really a constant, reliable go-to option. And that's a problem. Combining that with the fact that you had that shaky offensive line that they really had to work around instead of work with in 2014, the Chargers at times struggled offensively, and that's exactly why. You look at it, they were 30th in the league in rushing yards. That's not good. It's not a good way to protect your franchise quarterback. And like I said, even though the sack numbers might not necessarily bear it out that much, a lot of Chargers fans will know, and people that watch the Chargers throughout the year, Philip Rivers was under pressure a lot. Through the middle, on the outside, whether teams blitzed or not, he was under, it seemed like, constant barrage. And it always seemed like to me Philip Rivers would be in the shotgun, he'd be there for a second or two, and then he's got to move around in the pocket. And that's not exactly the strength of Philip Rivers' game. Now, I will say defensively, I thought this team was okay, somewhat improved in 2014, which is why I thought this team was going to do better than maybe 2013 and maybe go a little farther in the playoffs, at least actually make the playoffs. They were 13th in the league in points allowed, 9th in total yards allowed. One of their biggest bugaboos, though, for a team that still has, I think, some issues and some questions in the secondary, is that when you're running a 3-4 defense, you have to be able to generate consistent pressure on opposing quarterbacks. And this Chargers team, once again, consistently failed to do that on the defensive side of the ball. They were 29th in the league in sacks. And you could say sacks are just one statistic, not a total measure. That is true, but it does represent something. If you're not getting home consistently, that probably means you're not getting there consistently. And more often than not, the Chargers didn't get there consistently, so they couldn't get home consistently in the face of opposing quarterbacks. And that's something that has to be rectified going forward. You have to do two things to me, offensively, defensively, to be successful in the National Football League. One, you have to be able to protect your quarterback. You can do that in a variety of ways. Offensive line play, in pass protection, running game, talent on the outside, all of these different things, scheme, what have you. But ultimately, it comes down to protecting the quarterback and putting that quarterback in the best situation to succeed possible. And then on the defensive side of the ball, you have to be able to impose your will on opposing quarterbacks. You have to be able to pressure them. You have to be able to take them out of their game. You have to be able to get them out of advantageous situations. You have to put them in the worst possible situations to succeed. So you have to protect your own quarterback while causing the protection to collapse around the opposing quarterback. And the Chargers, to me, consistently failed to do that throughout 2014, and that's a big issue heading into this offseason, something that must be fixed. What do the team needs for the San Diego Chargers heading into 2015, into this offseason? First and foremost, I do think you have to look primarily on the offensive side of the ball. You have a limited amount of time where Philip Rivers is going to be that guy. He is the face of the franchise. He is that guy. That is who you have to be built around, and you have to do more to be able to protect him. Like I said, two keys in the National Football League, protecting your own quarterback and getting after the other quarterback. The Chargers can't do either really well, and they have to do a better job on both areas. Offensively, they need a running back. Whether that comes in the form of somebody like Melvin Gordon in round one, only time will tell. But they must address the running back position early because Brandon Oliver is a complimentary player, not a feature back. Ryan Matthews is a free agent, can't really stay healthy. You don't really want to plunk big-time money into him. And Donald Brown is a role player for a reason because Donald Brown is who Donald Brown is. Then they must fortify that offensive line. They need a better option at left tackle, and they need help on that interior of that line, especially at the guard position. Not even mentioning the rotating door that was the center position for that line in 2014. You need an offensive line with talent that can protect, that can run block, but also an offensive line that can have continuity by staying healthy, and the Chargers struggled in that area. They need help outside. They need help inside on that offensive line. They also could use some help at wide receiver, too. Keenan Allen regressed a little bit in 2014. Relying on Malcolm Floyd other than to be an occasional flash-in-the-pan type of guy, I think is a mistake. Eddie Rowe's a nice system fit, but he's a slot guy at that. They really need that big-time weapon on the outside, something that they've lacked since Vincent Jackson left town. They need that type of receiver to come out of this draft class. And then on the defensive side of the ball, they need to find help at outside linebacker. Far too often, this team fails to generate consistent pass rush. And when you're running a 3-4, one of the biggest keys to generating a pass rush is via your linebacking core, especially on the edges. You must have that great explosive edge rush, and the San Diego Chargers don't have it. This is a team with a solid infrastructure, quality head coach, quality staff, the right quarterback, some talent on both sides of the ball. This is a team that with a good offseason and with changes maybe to the Denver Broncos and maybe the Chiefs kind of treading water, this is a Chargers team that you could potentially envision being a legitimate threat to win the AFC West in 2015 and potentially make some noise in the playoffs. But they have to understand this offseason they have two priorities. That is, one, to protect their quarterback in several different aspects, and then two, figure out a way to bring in some pieces that could more effectively get in the face of opposing quarterbacks and get those quarterbacks out of advantageous positions. If the Chargers can do that, this could be an 11 or 12 win team next year that could really make some noise in the AFC. And if they don't, they'll be exactly who they were this year. A team that at moments flashes greatness, and other moments you sit there and say, what the hell is this team doing? And they'll finish 8-8 or 9-7. And that's exactly what will happen.